A few years back, it was very interesting to note the trend of young adult novels that were coming across popular culture. Not only that, they spawned dozens of movies and sequels and spin-offs and things that tried to emulate what these novels were trying to say. Now, what I found really fascinating about this is not necessarily the sheer volume of all of this, but what type of literature and what type of movies they were. They were all dystopian literature. Now, dystopian literature is nothing new. This is something that has been around for quite some time. Famous examples would be Fahrenheit 451, 1984, A Brave New World, and even A Clockwork Orange. All of these fall into the category of dystopian works. Now, a dystopian work is interesting because it starts out in such a bad place. The idea is that in the future, there is no idealized utopia. Instead, what you find is a system already in place that oppresses people, that hurts people, and where lots of rights and things are restricted, even to the point where people can be killed. There are regimes in charge that hurt or suppress people. In the young adult world, books like the Hunger Games series, someone has to show up, though, and try to fix things. We even saw this a bit in 1984, which is a great work, but does not end on a happy note at all. I don't feel like that's a big spoiler. Most of us are adults, and we should have read 1984 by now. It's phenomenal. If you haven't, do it, because it's really good. Typically, though, someone shows up and fixes things. They fight back, and they fight the powers that be so that everything can be fine and Jim dandy. I think it's interesting to see these pieces of work being so popular. After all, it's about some kind of future, and human beings, as it happens, are always interested and always concerned about the future. We always have one eye looking forward, trying to figure out and guess what's going on. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And literally anything could happen. Anything in our wildest imaginations could, in fact, conceivably happen. The odds of it happening are slim. But who's to say that we won't face an alien invasion or a zombie horde tomorrow morning? I actually cannot say with 100% certainty that those things will not happen tomorrow. Literally, the future for us is a blank slate. We can have predictable things, and based on what we've seen in the past and in the present, we can make these educated guesses about what may or may not happen. And the odds of things happening either go down or go up. But even when we start doing that, we find ourselves in a bit of trouble. Because if we start basing what might happen in the future off of things that are happening right now, we're going to wind up smack dab in the middle of our own dystopian literature. Because human beings like to imagine worst-case scenarios all the time. I know I do. For me, when I think of traveling or something, I always plan worst-case scenario. I'm the kind of guy who will always have an umbrella in case it might rain. And if it doesn't, the only thing I have to do is expend a little energy and look like a fool because I'm carrying an umbrella when it's 60 degrees and sunny out. The bottom line is that we are anxious about the future. We like things predictable. We want there to be a happy ending so bad it hurts. And so this trend of these dystopian novels and movies, what they do is they start off bleak and terrible, and they wind up putting you in a place where we think we can do this, we can take care of the future. And in a sense, there's a certain amount of hope and joy that comes with that. After all, for the most part, these stories end on a happy note. That's what we want. We want to know that everything is going to be okay in the future. And as limited human beings, that is not something we can know with 100% certainty. In our gospel reading today, Jesus himself paints a rather bleak view of the future. He starts off simply by saying that the temple is going to be destroyed. Now, this is both literally and metaphorically. He, of course, is pointing to the time when the temple will again be destroyed, when it gets torn down and desecrated. Yet he is also speaking plainly about his death. For the people hearing this, not thinking about his death and his eventual resurrection, when they hear that the temple is going to be destroyed, it fills them with fear, it fills them with doubt, and it fills them with anguish. The temple is the one thing that makes them who they are. At this point in history, we have to understand that the people in Jerusalem, though they be Hebrews, though they be Jewish people, they do not have their own land. They are under Roman occupation. And so Rome says, yes, you can have your little temple, you can worship your little God, but at the end of the day, know who is in charge. Know who is the boss. And so one of the things that they did and they latched onto was the temple worship, because this was their way of saying, this is who we are. This is the cornerstone and the key to our existence and our identity. Their identity was tied up with their religious affiliation and their rituals, and center to all of that was worship in the temple where God literally lived and dwelled. And so to hear someone come along and say that this temple is going to be destroyed, it's going to be desecrated, all of these beautiful things are going to be torn down, it fills them with this fear, with this anxiety, with this panic, that they are going to yet again lose the central thing that makes them who they are. And immediately after Jesus says this, the next words out of their mouth is, when? Tell us when this is going to happen. Tell us exactly when this will happen so we can get ready, so we can prepare, so we can, I don't know, do what? Take the necessary steps to try to fight the future? And he paints an even bleaker picture of the future for them. People will come in my name and say, I am he, and the time is near, but they're liars and you can't listen to them. There's going to be when you hear of wars and insurrections, don't be terrified, for these things have to take place first. But wait, there's more. The earth itself will shudder and shake. There will be great earthquakes and terrible portents and omens in the skies, and it's just going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. You're going to be betrayed by your friends and by your family. Some of you are going to be put to death, all because you speak in my name. This is what Jesus is saying awaits the people. This is Christ, the bringer of peace and love and joy and all these flowery, happy, hippie feelings. He's saying that things are going to be absolutely terrible and terrifying. And I know that there's some smart aleck disciples sitting there going, yep, I knew it, called it. Things are going to get bad. Because there's always that one person who's like, yes, things are bad now. They're going to get worse. It's going to be absolutely terrible. And yet if Jesus just left this here, there would be no hope. There would be absolutely no hope. Because let's face it, for us today, we feel like there's no hope. You turn on the news, you read the newspaper, and you see what? Just about everything Jesus was talking about. Wars and rumors of wars, insurrections, kings fighting with each other, political backstabbing, children starving, people dying, tidal waves, earthquakes. All of these things are happening right before us. And it fills us with fear and with dread because we see these words and we know that Jesus was always honest and always told the truth. And we're filled with anxiety and we're like, okay, so what now? It's going to get worse. We're going to have an even further rock bottom. Like, how can we possibly get lower with everything that is going to happen? But Jesus doesn't leave it here. He says, yes, Things are going to get bad in the future. You can't control the future. Only God can control the future. But there is hope. Not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls. You will be hated because of my name, but you'll be fine. He looks at the people and says, yes, it's going to be bad. It's going to get ugly, and it's going to get worse than you can possibly imagine. But it's going to be fine. I think about all the times I've taken my kids to amusement parks, and they all talk a big game, and it's hilarious. They're like, Daddy, I want to ride the big roller coaster. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because I know how this is going to end. It's going to end with you screaming and crying, and I'll be laughing and feeling like a terrible parent. And so inevitably what happens is we go on the big scary roller coaster. And my favorite in recent memory was when I did Space Mountain with some of the kids. And I was like, yeah, Space Mountain, it's awesome, it's fun, and it's exciting, and it's in the dark and jerky and drops you fast and suddenly, and I know they're going to freak out, but they wanted to ride it so bad. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Yeah, we want to do it. Okay, let's do this thing then. And sure enough, the whole time we were on there, I heard screams of terror. And I'm sitting back there in the dark with my head bobbing back and forth because it's a very fast, jerky ride, laughing hysterically, feeling like a bad person because I knew what was going to happen. And I just kept yelling over the roar of the track, it's fine, it's almost over, relax, it will be fine eventually. That calm, reassuring thing that, yes, even though your heart is beating fast, even though you're terrified right now, I promise you somehow, some way, it's going to be fine. And it was. And that's what Jesus promises his disciples. That's what Jesus promises us. You see, the thing is, with God, time gets all wibbly-wobbly and wonky. Time is weird to talk about when it comes to God, because for God, the past and the present and the future all happen simultaneously because of how powerful God is. And you sort of have to get into metaphysics to explain it all. To understand that God sees both the beginning and the end and even the middle, like all of time simultaneously, God can view. And we don't do that. We see things linearly. And so it's confusing for us. But while we're here listening to this sermon, while we're going about our lives, God is already in the future and sees the end and sees how everything is going to be. And God sent Jesus to the people, and his message was, yeah, things are going to get bad. Oof, that's a particularly rough patch right there. But guess what? Once you get through that, everything is going to be amazing. The prophet Isaiah talks about this time. The prophet Isaiah speaks about how everything is going to be. This notion of how the future really will be, how it will look, and how it will act. For I am about to create new heaven and new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. This beautiful message of hope. That's what the future really is. If the future exists and can fill us with fear and dread and anxiety, why then can the future not exist and fill us with hope? Why do we have to always be stuck in the dystopian novel? Why can't we be in the utopian novel? Or why can't we just realize that at some point in the future, everything is going to be fine? And that's why those books sell. That's why those movies sell. Because things are bad, but people know they're bad. And people do what? They stand up and they fight to make things right. They fight for that idealized future. They fight for the time when the lion will lay down with the lamb, where there will be peace in the land, where the land will be blessed. They fight for what is right. This notion of what Isaiah is talking about. Now, we're lucky. Because we don't have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting here. I mean, if God is omnipotent and in control of all time, then all of this is going to happen regardless. But it doesn't mean that we get to sit back and rest on our laurels, because yes, while the future is filled with hope, the question then becomes, what do I personally have to do to be about this process? And I think that's the challenge for us in these passages. Yes, the future is going to be fine. Yes, everything is going to be fine. Eventually, somehow, some way, the future can fill us with hope. But what about right now? When we still turn on the TV and we see people starving, when we see people being hated on for how they are or how they look or how they act or who they love, what are we supposed to do about all of these problems that we find in the world? Why, God, are you not solving these problems? And God looks at every one of us and says, I am solving the problem. I made you upset about it. Now get off your butt and go do something about it. We are to be about the reconciling work of Jesus Christ. We are the children of God. The kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, is not just some far-off thing for us in the future, but as Jesus said, it is in our midst. It is here now. We have the capacity to help the hurting, to hold people by the hand and say, yes, things are terrible. And yes, there is a very good chance, given history and given future and probability, that things are going to get worse. But after that, we can say, after all of that, in the midst of the struggles and the trials and the tribulations and the hatred and the pain, after all of that, friend, I promise you one day, everything will be fine. I learned a long time ago not to make a promise that I couldn't keep. It's one of the things that they actually teach you when you go through foster parenting classes. They say, don't ever make a promise that you cannot 110% keep. Because all you're going to do is do further damage and hurt that person. So I do not make promises that I know I cannot keep. And that's just not with my kids or any kids, but that's just in general. That's how I roll. That's how I live my life. So I will say, I will do my best to do it, or we will see. And I will do my best, but I am very plain. I am going to try this. If it doesn't work, here's why. But if I know I can do it, I will say, yes, absolutely, I will do it. It's the same for little things, and it's the same for big things. Now, all of that aside, now that y'all know that about me, when I tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt what I believe in my core and in my heart of hearts, that one day everything is going to be fine, I am not just saying that. I firmly and truly believe that God is in control of all things. That is a message worth preaching. That is a message worth sharing. And you don't have to even just talk to people to share it. You can just love on people. You can care for people. We can be the church and look at those who are hurting and who are lost. And we can take them by the hand and say, yeah, things are terrible and things could get worse. But guess what? God loves you. And eventually, once we get through this, we are going to go through this fire hand in hand together and see Jesus. And the whole thing will be redeemed. And that is hope. Hope is one of the most powerful things in the world. You know, they always say what? That it's darkest before the dawn, right? If you ever are up early enough to see the sunrise, they say that it'll be really, really dark out right before the dawn comes. And yet, the dawn comes. And you see that little crack of light just pierce the darkness, and suddenly everything, because of this one singular tiny little dot of light, just starts lighting up, and the darkness slowly fades away, and the sun rises again. And that is the hope that we live in. Though we may be in a dark night, though it may be an incredibly dark night, the night will pass. That is the hope that we live in. We don't need to fear the future. We need to be working together for the future because of this hope. It's just like Annie said. The sun will come out tomorrow. And when that sun comes out, it'll be the most glorious and beautiful sunrise we have ever seen. Amen.